Welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast in which we assemble to explore the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe 1 minute at a time. In this, our 6th season, we are looking at The Avengers. I'm Andy Nelson from the True Story FM Entertainment Podcast Network.
And I'm Steve Rogers, and I smell a cover-up.
Today, we're talking about Minute 61, which begins with Bruce telling Tony he can control it, and ends with Steve's stealthy leap. Joining us on the show, it's the Timeline Scavengers themselves back in the house. That's right, James Anderson and Colin Parker. Hello, you two.
Hello. Hey. We're here. Here we are.
We are thrilled. We are thrilled to talk about this minute with you. And my first question, as we learned last time you were on when we were talking about the car wash, we learned the secret to the picking of the minutes, that Colin's minutes were very specific, while James's were just drawn out of a hat, essentially. Which one is this?
Well-oiled machine. That's what you guys are.
This is drawn out of a hat. This is a drawn out of a hat. Yep. We're recording one of each tonight. Little peek behind the curtain.
Oh, fantastic.
Hey. Letting people know what's going on.
Is that right, Colin?
I believe so. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I think I was just kind of like, listen, I love the whole movie, but there's 2 things in particular I want to see, and then everything else I think is kind of like fair game, I think.
Oh, no, it's the next one after this. Never mind. It's the one you specifically said, I think, is the one after the one we're recording.
Yeah, the one that was, for me, that was like, for lack of a better term, non-negotiable. Although, obviously, if someone picked it before us, I would have been like, okay, that's fine.
No,
but like,
I wouldn't let that happen.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's nice.
I got you, but
I like Colin and James come to just throw down with other guests.
Yeah.
I know. We're going to start a whole new show of just guest fights.
Guest on guest by minute.
Guest fights. Interesting.
Hang on, I got to register a domain. Totally unrelated.
I'm sure members would love to pay.
I feel like that's a really cool idea, but you got to be really careful because I feel like that's a lion's den situation, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes.
I will absolutely leave this call immediately.
No, you're good. You're good.
Hang on, I got to set up a new Patreon. Shut up. Right.
Oh, yep.
Because the thing about that is you either get your really athletic sort of workout, but you also could get a really cool Foley thing going on with an audio medium and be like, oh no, he's throwing a chair. Ching, ching, ching.
Everyone has to bring their own Foley. That's and then we get to like talk. We can vote later, like which Foley actually would win. Was it the chicken?
Friend or Foley?
Ooh, that's good.
Andy, I thought this idea was really, really stupid, but guests bringing their own Foley just made it a real thing in my head. It just became a show. This is your fault. This is on you. We're going to do
why
a new
we're
show.
here.
This is going to have to be tag team because I would rely heavily on Colin bringing anything at all. I have my Golden Girls sound cue that I could bring. That's pretty much it. That's what I'm bringing.
I'm sure that could win. Many of the challenges.
Do not mess with B. Arthur.
That's true. That's true.
Disembodied voice of B. Arthur.
Guest fights, friend or Foley. This is happening for real.
All right. Well, let's get into this minute here. So we're starting this minute in the Wishbone Lab. We're mid-conversation between Tony and Bruce as they're talking about basically like their powers. Specifically, they're kind of talking about Bruce at this particular point in time, about how Tony can control his powers. He learned how, and for Bruce, it's different. And the whole thing with Gamma and the other guy and all this sort of stuff. So let's talk a little bit about these two in this conversation. So, I mean, how does this play for you?
I really like it. I think it's always cool to see basically 2 guys talking about insecurities and feelings of being out of control and stuff like that. I think there's a really cool therapy element to this, sort of sharing of feelings and stuff, that it feels really cool to find in the middle of a Marvel superhero, popcorn movie.
I also feel like what is kind of cool to me is that they'd never really addressed it, I think, in the MCU proper, but when you look at Iron Man 1 and Iron Man 2 before this, right? Tony, and actually really Iron Man 3 kind of touches on old Tony Stark as well. Tony is seen drinking quite a lot. And although he does kind of like make a drink in this movie, he doesn't really get like drunk anymore. And I don't necessarily think they ever went necessarily the full Tony Stark as an alcoholic route, but I feel like they were kind of towing that line a few times. And there's something about him post Iron Man 2 that is a little bit more about controlling himself a little bit, although he still is smug and, I'm so smart. I'm the smartest one in the room. But then I think he likes when Banner's there because I think it really depends on the field. I think either one could be the smartest in the room. Like, I think, as much as Tony has learned about certain types of sciences overnight, as he mentions in a previous scene, like, definitely Banner could run circles around him in certain regards, but like, I don't think Banner could build a Iron Man suit.
Yeah.
Per se. Or if he did, it wouldn't be like as good kind of thing. Like, I think that they both respect each other's like knowledge. And at the same time, Tony likes to sort of, he says it, I believe later, he likes to poke the bear. Or maybe he just said, I don't remember which order the different scenes in the lab happen, but like, he likes to poke the bear because I think that he's the only person, in my opinion, in this movie that actually trusts Banner.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, does he trust or is he still playing? Because so much of what we were kind of talking about, I love that you brought it back around to like the poking at that alcoholism and the post Iron Man 2 stuff, because so much of what we get from Tony on the bridge, in the helicarrier, it's really that his sort of version of drunken master, right? Like he is
absolutely,
he is sloppy and he's clumsy and he's abrasive and he's jokester, but meanwhile he's placing bugs all over the place. And this whole conversation in the lab is his sort of drunken master version of talking with somebody that he actually respects. Like, right. I kind of feel like he's just poking to see what else is under there, right? This is him experimenting some more.
Has he zapped Banner yet? He has, right?
That was like 4 minutes ago or so.
Okay. Yeah, I couldn't remember if that was right after this or right before it. Because I guess it definitely would be before Thor shows up. So I guess that does make sense.
And it was before Steve comes in right as he's doing it and gets on his case. And that kind of is where their argument starts. And then it continues until Steve walks out in a huff and then goes to
do this little side mission.
His investigation, right.
This conversation is the more subtle version of the electric shock. This is, okay, so you didn't turn when I zapped you. What can you do when I'm full Tony Starking at you? Like,
well, the relationship between them is so interesting. We were just talking about this with our guest in the last minute about this idea of Tony finding in Bruce somebody that he can actually talk to, and this is like potentially the first person that might become one of this team that he's actually interested in, and everyone else he kind of sees himself not necessarily above, although he probably does, but more that they just aren't working to kind of achieve the levels he is, as far as like they didn't do the reading, like that sort of thing. And Bruce is the sort of person who can actually have the sort of conversation that Tony is interested in having. And so there is this position that he's kind of taking this conversation here about, I genuinely want to know more about you, and I want to have this conversation with you because I don't want you to leave, because you probably are the only reason that I would actually want to stay on this team.
Yeah.
I think the drunken master thing also kind of, interestingly enough, because they are very similar in many regards, feels very Bruce Wayne to me. Like,
sure,
even though Tony Stark is always Tony Stark and Iron Man and he are one, since he came out
in
to the
MCU,
world.
Yeah.
No, for sure. Well, even in the comics now, it's like
eventually, but
but like even in like the modern tellings, like by now he always, or every time they reset the timeline, it's always like he immediately. But like the thing to me is the idea of when he's up on that bridge, he's sort of playing that aloof billionaire guy because that's what everyone sees on TV and that's what they expect of him, and it lets him get away with the stuff because they're kind of like, this guy again. But really, at the back of his mind, he's already formulating a plan. He's already thinking. He's already, like, everything is already firing off, which is why he does the bugging. And I think that's why he goes down to talk with Banner, too, because it's, when he's like, this doesn't stink to you, like he knows that Banner is smart enough to see something else is happening kind of situation. And I like the way that he kind of plays off of that, because again, like the way he even interacts with Cap is not how he interacts with Banner at all.
But you know how beautifully this is blocked, though, is exactly to parallel the same sort of tete-a-tete that he goes with. With Stevie's got his stuff on and they're fighting in the woods. And this one, they're playing the mirror game, the improv game, right? It's perfectly set up to go head to head. So they're kind of matching face and matching swipes on the see-through screen until they get to sort of last word each other, which I think is a really artful way to mimic what they did with fists in the last sequence with Tony and Steve and Thor.
There's such Breakfast Club vibes here for me, where it's like Bruce Banner is like I've been thinking since we started talking about like the difference between like a gifted engineer and a scientist, and how Tony can go from theory to practice and build the thing that he was just talking about. And Bruce is more of a like, I can get there eventually with science, but like, if you give me a cave and some metal, I might have a little bit of an issue.
Right.
This exchange is like, all right, follow me with this. Judd Nelson and Anthony Michael Hall in Breakfast Club, but they're superheroes, and Judd Nelson is like off the charts gifted. Like he's the kind of like slacker that is slacking because the teacher isn't even on his level. And this feels like a conversation where he's like, my gift for understanding this stuff has allowed me to live a life and find a purpose other than the work. And it feels like in Bruce, we have the kind of guy that has spent so much time in the lab. And then he has this extra part of him that actually takes life experience away from him. So he has a bit of a nihilistic streak in him, and it's such an interesting thing to see like those two. It's almost like a philosophical debate going on where it's like you can do anything, there's something there for you, versus what and why and who cares, and am I even going to experience it if the other guy who I refuse to call his branded name, is he going to be the one that experiences it because he's the strong one, which is something he's going to wrestle with for like 4 movies or something like that.
We have talked a lot about this Hulk that we get in this film and how we really like that there is this darkness, this edge, this sense of scariness to this particular Hulk that we don't necessarily have in the subsequent films. And what I'm getting from kind of, as you're talking about that, it got me thinking that, this conversation is in some capacity, this conversation kind of like the relationship that Tony and Banner will kind of develop moving forward. But like, this is the thing that perhaps Bruce actually needed to actually start making those character changes. And so that he wasn't this guy who was living on the edge, but was actually taking some lessons from Tony and learning how to kind of live in a way where he could manage stuff better. And so over the course of this franchise, we can see that, Hulk does change quite a bit. And maybe this is kind of part of the reason why.
It feels to me like a conversation between someone with ADHD and someone with bipolar, and they have similar things that are similar in the way they express themselves, and yet different sort of conclusions reached. And it feels like Bruce Banner is like the low mood, and then the Hulk is the heightened mood. And so the low mood is like, what's even the point? And Tony's like, but you're brilliant. What is going on? I'm always up here.
Yeah.
And I think that there's so much to the idea of seeing someone similar, like in a mirror, like we were saying, but like hopefully Bruce is able to find something in this person that is, like you're saying, like someone that's similar to him but different in hopefully some productive ways that we can see, as you said, like going forward through this movie and the subsequent movies. and turning him into sort of a more well-rounded, peaceful creature that we maybe can see in a couple of years, half a decade or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, and that's personally, I mean, I feel like I kind of struggle with that a little bit too, because like I definitely much prefer Avengers 1 and Avengers 2, and even most of Ragnarok Hulk. Like, Ragnarok starts giving you the idea that Hulk can actually fully understand more than, just, smash kind of thing, or like, we're attacking, here's the thing. He starts having like kind of conversations, and I don't think that's like the downfall at all. But I feel like part of Hulk's magic, I think a little bit to me, is the tragedy of the character. And I think that we're kind of losing a little bit of that sense of the character, which I think is also fine. Like, I think you can kind of go through a story arc where things kind of improve, things get better. But I also think that Hulk kind of eventually, even in comics, when he has these better moments, things end up kind of leveling back out, which is where I hope we kind of end up, because I don't know. I just think he's a really fascinating character to me in this movie from start to finish. Mark Ruffalo's Bruce Banner, I think, is really, really good. Like, I really like him in this role. And I feel like this scene is like maybe one of the better examples of it. Like, that, and also the scene where, he first they all start to argue in the lab. Like, that whole bit, I think all of these scenes in the lab are really strong Banner characterizations. One of the things that I, noted for like this scene in particular was the moment where they go to he swipes away all the stuff that they're looking at so they can just look at each other through the glass. And I think for sure that their reflections are added in with CGI, because
I was thinking that,
because specifically Tony Stark looks a little off.
Yeah.
And I think that that's probably just a matter of, depending on how you do it, there might not fully be a way of not getting the camera in that shot or something. I don't know. I don't know what it is that they're doing there, or, because they have all these things on the glass in order to put the green screen effect, like, for the CGI bits, probably makes it so they can't fully film in that kind of space. But I also think that there's a moment where, I think it's the second time you go back to Banner, there's an interesting thing about how much of his face is in the shadows of the reflection versus Tony's is like fully like present. The first time you see Banner's reflection, you see most of his face. And the second time, his face is like slightly more shadowed. And in my opinion, and again, maybe it's just wonky CGI, but I think that his head shape is slightly different, like not fully Hulk, but it does not look like just Mark Ruffalo. And to me, I feel like it's a very, whether it was intentional or not, I always thought that was very interesting, because to me, it was like just a brief moment of like kind of recognizing that the Hulk is under the surface, that he's kind of always waiting to sort of break out to come to the other side. A little bit of like the man in the mirror situation.
I think you're getting to a good point. I think it's why we celebrate Hulk, and why I'm right with you. Like, I celebrate the earlier Hulk in the MCU precisely because we celebrate the archetype. Like, he is interesting because he is an interesting storyline over time. He's Jekyll and Hyde. He is the duality of man. He is great power, great responsibility, and the fear of what we hath wrought. And I think that's the interesting part. And as soon as you make him in control, and this is the whole line of Professor Hulk, like, we lose the mystique and the mystery and the challenge of what happens when we lose control. And I think it's no longer fun exploring that.
It's like how I didn't like the Alanis Morissette or No Doubt albums after they got happy.
Yes.
Because it sort of became boring.
Just like
it's that same thing. There's no conflict.
There's no angst. There's no Alanis without the angst.
The same could be said for Hulk.
Yeah, exactly. The Hulk is the Alanis Morissette of the MCU. Like, I'm sorry to roll out that old cliche, but
old cliche.
The old cliche.
And Scarlett Johansson is Gwen Stefani, like Natasha is Gwen Stefani. Is that fair? Oh, you're thinking about that. That was a finger to chin moment. Okay.
I'm going to have to think about that. I'll come back to you.
All right, please.
It's interesting that you're having doubt about that.
Well, I mean, there's other, like, could she be like a Shirley Manson? like a sort of lead singer of Garbage sort of deal. She's more
no, that's actually not a bad point. Okay. But you already brought up No Doubt. So
like, I mean, I think Tony's the Gwen Stefani, if anything, because like he's sort of like SoCal carefree sort of deal.
He ain't no Hollaback girl. Gotcha.
I am upset at that.
because that was
so-
you mixed generations and missed the point entirely.
Yeah,
And so,
exactly.
Okay.
Thank you.
in fact, we're going to cut out most of your track. It's just going to be silence. Anyway,
Oh, Lord.
Were you still making your point? I don't know where we are.
Oh no, just that like when someone's conflict, it's weird to watch him having reached sort of a resolution in his conflict,
yes.
because then it sort of is like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
What do you? And that's why, in the comics it's always something. Well, Hulk's subtitle is basically it's always something, because you can't see him get through the thing and then move on. I think also there's something to be said for the Avengers comic has those people all have their own comic book titles. So you can see Hulk. Well, Hulk isn't in the Avengers for almost ever in the comics, but like you see Tony's sort of experience through his own comic. So that when he comes to the Avengers, he's had this whole thing where now we don't have to see him go through a whole thing in the team issue. And I think that because we haven't seen Mark Ruffalo as the Hulk in his own starring whatever at all ever, it's weird to see him sort of go through his whole arc, his whole character arc via these team movies.
Like through other properties, or TV shows.
Well, yeah, I mean, and you can argue that the Incredible Hulk, I mean, there's definitely a through line coming from that film, even though he wasn't in it. I mean, the suicide attempt that he talks about in this film was the original opening of that film, deleted scene and everything. So I mean, it's definitely there. But I mean, there's definitely a line with Hulk that is incredibly fascinating, and I believed aren't they still doing Planet Hulk? Didn't I hear that's
they're hinting at it
in the works, or is that
they're definitely setting up the pieces?
I think they kind of have to at this point, because I think that dropping his son, like just dropping that bomb and then never addressing it would be unhinged, I think. And like Marvel has, I think, occasionally made some missteps or kind of like retcon some stuff, move some things on. But I feel like that would be a little bit too big of a step to change. But like, I think the fascinating thing too about the way the team works specifically in Avengers, or really all these characters, is that none of the characters, or at least none of the main heroes necessarily, because I would, this is going to sound bad, and I need you to follow me on this, but I would argue that, Black Widow and Hawkeye, although are featured in the Six, they are not really the focus of this movie. They are definitely supporting characters within like kind of like the big three plus Hulk.
They're coming in as the SHIELD representative on the
right.
team.
And I think that's the thing that makes them a little bit interesting in this movie too, is that but also again, Hulk is the only person who comes into this movie with really their whole thing figured out. So like they come in as fully developed heroes, characters, things like that. Thor, Captain America, and Iron Man are still developing. They're still figuring things out. And so it makes it interesting that what you can then have is throughout the movies is some characters moving upwards while others are starting to fall or to kind of lose some sense of themselves kind of thing. Because not to get too far ahead of ourselves or anything like that, but like in this movie, what works for Bruce Banner and the thing that he thinks that he has of that's my secret, I'm always angry. It turns out that like that kind of ends up biting him in the ass in the second film, because like when someone can prey on that and kind of heighten it, he kind of then doesn't trust himself anymore. And that's why I think he overcorrects eventually, like when he starts to fully pull himself out of this. And I do think that is what still makes some of the new stuff interesting for Hulk. But like these scenes here are great because there is that mystery of when is he going to snap? When is he going to have that moment where the monster is unleashed? And it's a little like Jaws too, right? Like at all times.
Jaws 2?
Okay. Tony is always in the water.
When Bruce bites that electric line.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And, and it's just wild because at all times, Fury is like, it's the 4th of July. The beach has to be open. And Tony Stark is like, how can we let this mayor run this with only one eye? How does he see things? I'm losing my thread a little bit, but I think at all times there is this thing where they're all in the boat. Literally, they're on the helicarrier. And at all times under the surface level, there is the threat of Bruce.
Which is the name of the shark in Finding Nemo.
Yes. I was kind of going for a shark joke.
Yeah, like a sort of shark motif. Got it. Yeah. I think that's very true.
So many Bruces.
Also, Jaws was also named Bruce. Sorry, I just remember that.
Well, that's what I thought you were referencing.
Yeah, that's what Bruce. I thought it was too. But then when James went for Nemo,
he was doing Finding Nemo joke, playing off of the Jaws Bruce.
Here's the deal: I'm super young at heart, and I don't know what is Jaws.
I see.
Were there other Jaws movies before Jaws 4?
Jaws is a joke in that Back to the Future movie, right?
That means he can't even pull a James Bond reference because that's also too old.
I will say I do look forward to you listening back to this and hearing me do a quick panic search of me going, I literally typed, was the name of Jaws Bruce? Was my Google search real fast? Like I got so nervous.
That's so funny.
But ironically, it was also Bruce in Finding Nemo, played by the original actor of Bruce Wayne, or Bruce Banner in the first Hulk with Ang Lee.
Oh.
I'm just saying, like, I'm not a...
No, it wasn't.
Yeah.
No. Finding Nemo, it was not... He was one of the other sharks.
No, he wasn't.
He was his buddy.
He was the main shark.
No,
he was his buddy. Bruce was Bruce.
Bruce was the big, deep voice. It was Barry Humphries.
Okay.
Barry Humphries.
But see, I've forgotten the actor's name who actually played...
Hello. Eric Bana.
Eric Bana. Yeah, Eric Bana.
He played Anchor.
And Bana
right.
is...
It sounds like Banner.
It sounds like Banner when you say it with an Australian accent. You guys...
Bana.
We've come full circle. We figured it out.
Oh wow.
Eric and Bruce Bana.
Can I I'm going to stop this crazy train that we're on real quick.
Sure.
I just want to talk about Black Sabbath. We haven't talked about this shirt yet.
We haven't. Good.
Yeah, it hasn't come up. I keep meaning to, and then it still hasn't. This was the 1978 Never Say Die U.S. Tour shirt and the art. And I mean, that's really all I had to say about it. But, I love it.
Was that with Dio? Was Dio the singer for Sabbath at that point?
No, it was. I believe it was the tour where Roth went missing, wasn't it?
I don't know. I only know Roth from Van Halen. Is there another Roth?
They opened it. They opened the tour.
Oh, I see. You were talking about that Roth. Got it.
Yeah, they opened the tour, and
you're saying David Lee Roth went missing on a Sabbath tour?
That's what I thought. I was reading about this earlier, and if it wasn't him, it was somebody, because I know that they opened the show, and maybe Ozzy went missing.
It was the last album with Ozzy on Black Sabbath.
Yeah, I don't know. I said all that, and now I can't find where I had been looking. But I swear that I saw something saying that on the tour, and I maybe it was Ozzy, but one of the two of those went missing on the tour. Or I swear it was on this tour. It may have been a different tour.
When Ozzy went missing on the 78 Black Sabbath Van Halen tour. So it was Ozzy that went missing.
Ozzy went missing, okay.
According to the search that I did, where I'm not going to click on the link because I think that the title says it all.
It looks a little funky.
Research.
Yeah. So, but yes, that was the tour, and you know, it's interesting that it's this particular shirt because this shirt does not have, or this album does not have Iron Man on it, but they did actually do Iron Man in the set on the tour, so I guess that counts in some extent. But
yeah. And in a way, I guess Tony kind of has a never say die attitude.
You could say that. You certainly could say that.
The circle is complete.
It is. We're always looking to complete these circles. What I love about this freaky gas mask that's on this shirt is it kind of looks like an alien face hugger. And which is fascinating because it came out before before Alien did, and it makes me wonder if H.R. Giger saw this shirt and goes, I have some ideas.
H.R.
Something-
Giger, noted plagiarist.
I mean,
you can see Black Sabbath in all of his work.
If we're going to go down this road, on the cover of the album, it's a fighter pilot mask that is the thing. And now I'm thinking of how that fighter pilot mask kind of looks like a face hugger too. And then you get into as the face hugger, like the military industrial complex, and it sort of, makes you part of one big sort of hive mind sort of deal. Lays its eggs in you. And yeah, exactly. Like
more military propaganda. Where will it stop?
Around every corner.
Even in space, they still get you.
Even in space.
That's actually the motto of Space Force, is even in space.
And that's it.
Where no one can hear you scream, conveniently.
That's right. I'm glad that you said that. I saw the Black Sabbath shirt and I was going to comment on it, but I was like, there's no way that we haven't talked about it. And now we have.
It's just one of those things that it's in my head and I've not gotten to it. So I wrote myself a note. Make sure you talk about Black Sabbath today. So there it was.
Perfect.
So, I don't want to, I kind of don't want to go back into the Tony and Bruce conversation because we've had so much already. But I do have this one little thing, because there was this line where Bruce was talking about how it seems like Bruce is tiptoeing and Tony is strutting is kind of like the way that he words it. And what I do think is interesting, and this is just kind of going back to everything that we have said, is like, I do think that there is this interesting angle where you can look at how Bruce is reacting in this film, and even to your point, the next film. But it gets to that point where he really becomes comfortable in, I guess you could say, in his skin as far as the Hulk goes, and really starts strutting. And so that may be what we're seeing later in the franchise as Bruce is much more comfortable to the point where he's kind of welcomed Hulk into his life full time, as we see in the later films.
Despite one of my comments earlier about him having kind of everything figured out, I will say the one thing that he hasn't figured out yet, I think, I'm realizing this now, is also the concept of being a hero.
Did you say that Bruce has everything figured out before?
No, well, sorry, what I meant more of was figuring out his abilities, his powers, kind of who he is. He has a system in play in power, again, of the always being angry, but being able to kind of keep it surface level. And that way he can kind of turn it on whenever he wants to. And the idea is that if he's always angry, nothing can really get to him. And he can choose when to change, right? Which is, again, what this whole movie is about. Although, again, you'll find that there are times where Bruce can lose control, which is when Bruce is no longer, we'll say, home.
He's lying to himself, for sure.
So we'll just say in moments we get to...
Right, true. I mean, again, I don't necessarily... that's tough, because I don't necessarily think that's necessarily lying. I think it's just a matter of when Bruce can't be there to keep things in check, that's when the monster can also come out to play. And I think that's different than, him having... again, this control line, this control bit.
But if you're thinking, I'm always angry and therefore I'm in control, that's the solution. Someone's lying to someone, and I think it's you to yourself. I don't think this is a system I think he thinks is working, but isn't working. He's going to have to revamp later.
But I also think that part of the way that he makes it work is he avoids people. You know what I mean? He avoids being around everyone, because in the event that something doesn't work out, he can just be around no one to hurt. And so that is another situation here, which is Tony is kind of I'm surprised you're not strutting, you're not letting the big guy walk. But it's when he's out, I can't really control him per se. And also he is destructive. So I don't think he can see himself as a hero. Whereas Tony, who can also kind of go in and out of the persona, if you will, even though the persona is him just in a shiny new casing, he can always be the hero at the forefront, whereas Bruce can't really.
Oh no. Hold on. I don't know, I lost it. I had to just imagine that I said something really poignant, and I can't think of what it was.
Wow, good point, James.
That was a real gem.
That touching.
Thank
hadn't
you.
thought about that.
Right to the heart. Right to the heart. All right. Well, let's shift gears. We've got a little bit here of Captain America, of Steve, now that the seed has been planted by Tony and Bruce, he decides he's going to break into, it seems kind of like the Raiders vault somewhere on the helicarrier. He's breaking into this room. It doesn't trigger an alarm. There are people inside up on an upper level, although it seems like they're walking away, but they don't hear him breaking the door to get in. All of this just so he can come in because he's now trying to figure out what is going on with phase 2. And that's so we get a little mystery. The music is mysterious. Steve is being very quiet. He's leaping quietly. This is kind of where our minute ends. Thoughts about this setup and the way that this scene plays?
Yeah. How do they decide what mysterious objects they're going to store permanently on the helicarrier? Like, why does this room exist? Like, the equivalent of the giant file room where lost objects are stored. Why is this here? I mean, I know they're actually, he's finding weaponry stuff, but
I think that that's a lot of keeping it close at hand. Because, personally, if this is going to be Nick Fury's personal base, essentially, right? Like, if he's always going to be here, he doesn't want those falling into enemy hands. So if they're always nearby, they probably stand the greatest chance of not falling into someone's greedy little mitts.
All the stuff that Fury said was really, really cool. And then that's it. He's just like, that one's awesome.
If the Tesseract was not taken and it was not being studied, let's just say before Eric Selvig got involved in all of this, was the Tesseract stored in this room or was it stored somewhere down on ground?
I imagine on ground because they made it seem as though this was the maiden voyage of the helicarrier. They may have done some test runs with it, but I feel like the fact that this exists, I feel like you definitely would have heard of this outside of if they're doing test runs of it, sure, no one's probably going to be around. But I think that once it's launched, I think you kind of recognize it's there, as society. I mean, it is a little bit of, what's that? It's huge. They haven't figured out the cloaking thing, I think, yet, right? If I'm not mistaken.
No, they have.
It's cloaks. Yeah.
Yeah, it's.
Oh, I thought that was in the next
cloaked.
movie for some reason.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
Interesting.
Yeah. I didn't think that it. Well, they didn't seem to say that this was like the maiden voyage. It seemed to be old hat to a certain extent, for at least the way that I read it. For the crew on board, it really only seemed like Steve and Bruce who were surprised by the whole thing. But yeah, so I don't know. Anyway, Pete.
No, that was a surprise to hear that read on it because I never thought of it. I guess I can make that leap. It just seems like if it was the maiden voyage, I felt like Steve and Bruce were the audience surrogate for this experience. They're the ones who got to feel awkward. There should have been more
true. Yeah, I guess that's a good point.
Or pomp and circumstance if this were really the maiden voyage.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think I totally get that because I'm thinking back on it now because it's been probably about a year or so since I've watched the movie as a whole. But you're right. It does stand to reason because Nick Fury is so calm about it and does, kind of then make the bet of I think I've got something that you would be surprised by. And so he gives them the $10 or whatever. But I'm thinking back on it. You're right. There's definitely a lot of signs that would point to the idea that they've definitely been using this before.
But still, I mean, it's an interesting, I don't know, I guess it's just an interesting thought experiment. Would the Tesseract be here? Or would it be down on some SHIELD compound somewhere else? It does make me wonder.
It seems like they know just enough about the Tesseract maybe by now that they would have left it in a base somewhere, it just seems.
Right.
But I guess it speaks to, we've got this Wishbone lab here, which, if it's not Bruce or Tony working in it, I assume there are regular SHIELD scientists. Who knows? Eric might have been working in here before these two.
That's fair.
And so it's entirely possible that, especially if they had been working on phase 2, and we know there's a whole bunch of phase 2 weaponry stored in this ship. And I know that they had a bunch of it down in the Pegasus project that they got out of there before the whole place exploded. But it does make me think that they could have had a lot of that. They could have been developing it in here.
Right.
And storing it while they were.
Which would also make sense, I guess, to be why they would choose to go down on the ground. He could be up there and go, there's not enough space. We need to shift, so then because there's a lot of power. When you look at the room that they're in that first scene there with Force Shield, there is a lot of tech in that room. and a lot of cabling. So like they definitely would have run out of space probably on the helicarrier. So that does make sense.
Yeah, right.
Just because of cabling is what you're saying. I mean, there was a significant amount of cabling.
I mean, yeah, but I mean, overall, it's the amount of equipment where it's like we don't have enough room in this little facility. We gotta branch out.
And it's interesting, like you can see them developing or doing some experiments with the Tesseract on the helicarrier and then realizing, well, especially with Eric, depending on his state of mind as far as, Loki's possession and whatnot, but saying, I need more space. I need to have, because I mean, the NASA space that they filmed in was like a big dome. It was designed to, withstand a lot of, pressure changes and all that sort of thing. So it's entirely possible that they would have said, you know what, let's get this down to the ground because we need a different sort of space. Let's partner with NASA on this.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think NASA knows about the helicarrier?
That's an interesting question.
I don't know.
That's so in the realm of government agencies, we have the FBI, CIA. They know about each other. I assume there are levels of things within each that they don't necessarily know what's going on. But add S.H.I.E.L.D. into that mix, and then you start asking yourselves, okay, how much do each of these organizations actually know about things that they're doing?
Right.
That S.H.I.E.L.D. is up to for...
I'm sure there's probably, within some reason, I'm sure there's some stuff that never gets shared, just for classified national security type situations. But I also think that there's probably at some point always like hey, just like the right people need to know about these three things because we need you to, like, if you hear about this, whatever, it's, everything's cool, everything's fine. Like it does not need to be looked into. We're doing this, But I also think that like, I'm now wondering also, I mean, it's very possible that we didn't know when we first started everything how much we were going to do about the Infinity Stones, like fully.
Very true. Right.
Because like the Tesseract, I don't think ever truly felt like it was the casing for an Infinity Stone until we were like, we need to have a reason why this thing has this power. And, and I feel like an interesting thing about that too, though, is that if there was an idea at the very least that maybe it could be, it's interesting that NASA would be in charge of a project that has to do with the Space Stone.
NASA is also a triple secret government agency. I actually like living in a universe where that's possible.
I meant more of like it's a not a reference, but like a hint, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Just the idea of like, oh, we think it came from space, or we know it came from space, or whatever. So maybe NASA, but like it's also like, hey, it's the Space Stone.
Yeah,
for
sure.
They're all a little messy. The Mind Stone, being the scepter. Like there's things that just really clearly don't make a ton of sense. But anyway, Captain America is prowling around right now.
I had a question about this that I never noticed.
Okay.
The hoodie that he appears to be wearing, that's his mask?
Yeah, that's like his cowl.
That's his cowl or whatever?
Because he doesn't have a helmet.
It looks like a hoodie.
Looks like
I don't know. It looks like he's like kind of like a cool, like hip new 90s version of Cap with his hoodie and like his multiple layers of like
he did it. He got gussied up at Old Navy.
Yeah.
That's the next version where it'll be the same thing, but it will be like the hoodie that our kids wear, and it'll be this giant thing that hangs over his head. It won't be skin tight. It'll just be this big floppy blue thing, and people are like, how do you see through that thing? I'd be like, it's totally fine.
They just got it from Hot Topic.
Spirit of Halloween.
Right. Well, it's not like we haven't seen. I mean, Miles Morales ends up in a big old hoodie outfit.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's true.
We have precedent.
I've never noticed it before, and it looks really, I don't know, I guess silly or something. It feels like if it's skin tight, why would you ever take it off to just have it be hanging out on the back of your neck? I don't know. The Cap wants what it wants, I guess.
But it's better than was it Val Kilmer's Batman where he takes the cowl off and it just rips as he takes it off?
No, that's Michael Keaton.
That was Michael
Batman
Keaton.
Returns.
Yeah, so I think it's better than that because like why would you want a whole bunch of disposable like gummy cowls? That seems ridiculous.
They were licorice.
Haribo.
You need the gummy cowl so you can nibble on it.
Yummy. I eat my way out every day.
That's right. That's right.
Nom, 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 nom.
All right. Well, let's wrap this minute up. We'll have you two back in next 2 weeks from now to talk about minute 73. But thank you so much for joining us for this particular minute. We're thrilled to have had this conversation with you.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
Tell everybody about your show and what you two are up to.
Sure. So we are Timeline Scavengers, a podcast specifically designed to last forever, where we are assembling the MCU timeline in historical order, which is chronological order, but like specifically about like scene time stamps, framing, not like chronological as in Iron Man came out first. And then, the way that this show, I would say, is chronological release, but our show is historical order. And we are, at the time of recording, we just finished 1971 with D.B. Cooper and Loki. So we're still going to be doing some 70s and 80s for the next little bit. A lot of origin stories. And so if you want to find us, you can find us on Twitter at Timeline Scav, or you can go to throwthekidintheriver.com and go to scavengersnetwork.com/Timeline Scavengers, which I remembered now that I bought that domain on this show.
Yes,
when you were talking about you needed to make a new Patreon, I was like, wait a minute, do I still have this? And I went out and found it. And I was like, yep, got to remember to bring that one back.
Outstanding. Tell the people what you do when something like The Eternals comes out.
Right. So we do a lot of things called pickup episodes, which I believe we just finished, right? We did complete all of the Black Panther pickups, didn't we?
We finished recording them. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So we record what we call pickup episodes. We release them kind of normally, essentially, just to let people see the notification that they're out. And then we backdate them to a proper time so they show up in the correct order on our RSS feed. So if you start from the beginning, it's as if they were always there. But shows like Loki, Shang-Chi, Black Panther, Wakanda Forever.
Right. As a plug for the show, I love the show because it's like bonkers that you would decide to do a show like this. It is like enormously compelling. But my favorite thing is that the show so thoroughly gaslights you as if you were so prepared and you've done all these shows until you get to one of these pickup episodes and you hear you guys say, ugh. Okay, so we're going back to Babylon now. Like, it's so awesome. So I just love it. You guys have a great thing going. So it's a great show. I'm glad you could share some of that here.
Thank you.
Well, we'll have the links in the show notes, so everyone, you can go check them out and all of their stuff. Like I said, they'll be back to talk about minute 73 in a couple of weeks. So that's it for today. We'll be back tomorrow to talk about minute 62 with another guest. So, Pete, thanks as always.
I'm just hoping for more classic improv games, Andy.
Until next time, true believers.
Marvel Movie Minute is a production of True Story FM, engineering by Andy Nelson. This season's music is Message to the World by Anthony Vega, and this season's show art is by Winston Yavo. Find the show at truestory.fm. If your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, please consider doing that for our show.